Hi everybody, I'm Cynthia Good and I want to welcome you to today's Zoominar. This year we're focused on women reimagining the workplace. Of course we need to do that. Thank you so much for being here. Today's topic is male advocacy. Every successful woman has them. We know that men are still the decision makers in corporate America. And it's pretty much a prerequisite today to advancement, having male advocates. I think most of us have them. We just need to think about who they are and be proactive and reach out to them. I really wish that I had thought more about that early in my career. It would have made such a difference. And just getting ready for today's program, I reached out to a number of men of influence in my community, and we've accomplished some really cool things because of it, and I hope the same happens with you. We've got some fantastic experts for you today. Kevin Frank, he is the Director of Consumer Products at Newell Brands, and while he's new to that company, he is not new to having a role as a woman's advocate. So we're going to hear from him. We also have Gay Gaddis with us today. She literally wrote the book on this. She's a women's leadership expert, former chair of the Committee of 200. Her book, Cowgirl Power, talks a lot about this. Gay, go ahead and jump in there and talk to us about this.
I can go back to very early on in my career, Cynthia, and one of the people who stands out in my whole life is a man named Boone Powell, and I was very young. I was invited to become a member of the public relations team at Baylor Medical Center in Dallas. It was the largest healthcare facility in the Southwest, and a very interesting man had ascended out of being CEO into the head of the foundation. And what I can tell you about him is that he was much my senior, but I was invited, of course, to come to his office and visit with him about projects we were working on that would raise money for the healthcare facility. But one day I got this amazing phone call, and it was from the State Department. And I found out, this was at my home. They found me at my home. They called me and they said, when you walk in your office today, you're going to be met by a member of the State Department because you're going to have a very, very powerful political prisoner who is coming to Baylor for a surgery. So I immediately freaked out. I was very young. I was 22 years old. I had no idea how to handle a situation like that. So I ran immediately to Mr. Powell's office, to Boone Powell Sr.'s office. And I said, Mr. Powell, I don't know who this is who's coming, but I'm really afraid that I'm not capable or ready to handle this, and I may screw it up. He looked at me and he said, Gay, just the very fact that you are concerned you're going to screw this up makes me know you're not. He said, go back to your office, get your act together. And he said, you're going to handle this just fine. And so that moment, when I look back on it, gave me so much confidence. And I did handle it, and I was able to get through the whole process that went on for several weeks. And but his confidence in me and his ability to just be forceful with me in that moment led to a beautiful relationship with him. And I knew I could always count on him to tell me the truth and tell it like it is, and give me that confidence that I needed as a young woman in my career. So I'll never forget him, and he stands out still as one of my biggest confidence builders in my lifetime.
I love that. Thank you, Gay, so much for that example. And I also wanted to highlight what you mentioned about vulnerability. You really told them you were nervous, and sometimes that's hard to do. Well, for me, that's hard to do. So that definitely was, I think, a bonding moment. I want to go to our next final expert today. She is Catherine Jefferson. She is the executive director of Cox Media Group, and I've had the honor of watching Catherine Jefferson rise up through the ranks. I'm getting goosebumps, Catherine, at a variety of different companies over these last many years. She was with IHG, she was with Popeyes. Most recently, she was the chief people officer at Crystal. Now she's at Cox Media Group, owned by Apollo. And certainly, Catherine, it must have been and continue to be tricky navigating the hierarchy, because let's face it, everybody, let's be real clear. The decision makers in corporate America are men, the vast majority of decision makers. So how does a woman, a young, attractive woman of color, tell us, how have you been able to do that, to enlist that support of the men in those organizations, the leadership?
Thank you, Cynthia, and hello, everyone. I think it has been a blessing And sometimes when you're young, as Gay said, when you're younger in your career, you're unfiltered. And so sometimes I think as we mature, we get a little scared. And I think if we can keep some of that zeal and fearlessness that we have when we're younger, that would serve us well. But I would say a couple of things that have helped me, that have been themes throughout navigating any of those organizations and leaders. Number one, performance. So I tried to make sure that I performed well, so it was easy for anybody to help me, a woman or a man. And so I always try to make sure that I performed. And to Gay's point, John Jeddick, when I was early in my career, stepped away from operations in hotels and wanted to get into human resources. And it was so funny because I interviewed with him, had no experience. I'm like, I read that job description. And I remember, Cynthia, we've had this discussion where women, we think we have to know every single capability on a job description.
Right.
And I said, but I believe I can do this if you give me the opportunity. And he said, Catherine, not only do I think you could be in this entry level role, he said, I think you could be the head of HR. Little did he know that, and I have to find him, that not only was I head of HR for a hotel, but head of HR for a company. And so he saw that early, but I also try to make sure that I had the confidence and I perform when given the opportunity. As I progressed a little bit more in my career, projects. So sometimes it's like, take the project that maybe others don't want, really have that opportunity to get that experience and exposure. And the one man that really stands out to me then is Kevin Kowalski when I was with IHG, and we were trying to do some work with Crown Plaza, and we were doing repositioning. And that at the time wasn't the hottest, sexiest brand to be with, but it had a huge opportunity if we could shift the tide with that particular brand. And so I worked with Kevin on that project and got the opportunity to get that experience and exposure that served me well to end up getting exposure to the CEO of the company, Kirk Kinsale. So that gave me the opportunity to get higher and higher in the organization, take on different projects, take on different teams. And so I would say, really be strategic about projects. If there's an opportunity sometimes to raise your hand and be able to work with some of those men that are decision makers on a project, that's really important. It will serve you well. And then the final thing, I think that even as I got older and a little bit more seasoned, I still ask for what I want. And Cynthia, years ago, I'm going back on you.
Yeah, you are.
You remember the bookmark that you did?
That's right.
Ago.
Ask for what you want. You don't ask, you don't get.
Exactly.
Thank you for that, Catherine. Well, go ahead and finish.
Yeah, so that really resonated for me. And so, when I started to get exposure to the CEO at that time, Kirk Kinsale of IHG, and I was doing global projects and started moving into diversity and inclusion, I said, listen, I need you and the senior leadership team to be active participants and really lead this charge. And I had to ask for that. And as a result, we saw such a different level of engagement around DE&I at IHG at that time. And then when I moved into, interviewing for that chief officer role, I asked for what I wanted. Listen, I want this opportunity. And so I really shout out to Omar Janjua, who said, hey, you haven't been a head of a whole company's HR before. Are you sure you're ready for that? Yeah, I'm ready. Give me the opportunity. And what I don't know, we'll work through and navigate together because I'm a collaborative leader. And so I would just say if you start off with excellent performance, you really take a risk with projects that give you experience and strategic exposure to key leaders. And then that positions you well to ask for what you want. And that combination has served me well throughout my career.
I love that. Thanks so much for sharing that. I really appreciate how you and Gay were able to trace back to specific men and tie that to a significant degree of your success. That's huge. I also really love, Catherine, what you said about exposure. And I want to mention that part of the point of these monthly Zoominars, and by the way, this one's a pilot. These are created for our Pink Power Alliance members. Lisa's going to pop a web link in the chat on that so that you can learn more about it. But this is an ongoing development, part of an ongoing development program for our members, the Pink Power Alliance members. And a big piece of it, to what you just said, Catherine, is to provide exposure for these high potential women who have this ongoing opportunity for development. A lot of the companies are willing to cover the cost. If you want to participate, you go to your boss, say, please support me on this. They're going to back you up so that you can make sure to do it. But we really want everyone who's part of this right now to weigh in and tell us about your experience. What has your experience been in terms of male advocates? We're going to ask you 2 super quick questions. Lisa's going to pop up the first question on the screen. First question is simply, how many of you have male advocates? Tell us how many of you have male advocates. And we're going to look super quick and see what the results are. And I'm going to write it down so that give you another 2 seconds to do that, because I know everyone who's participating today is super quick. And then we can look at the results, I think, right now. Lisa, do you have the results? Okay, 66% have advocates. 34% don't. Okay, everybody, a third, more than a third of the people on this call do not have male advocates. Our goal is, to my experts, by the time we get off this call, we want every single person on this program to have a male advocate. Are we good? This has to happen. All right, our next question that we want to ask. Well, let's get, Catherine, what do you think? Well, before you put that up, well, okay, let's go ahead and ask this first. And then I want what are the barriers to finding male advocates? This is really important. Check all that apply. Is it that they're not available? Is it that you're not sure how to find them? Is it simply it's uncomfortable? Is it that you haven't made this a priority? Or is it that you tried this and it just didn't help? Now you can pick one of these or 2 or all, whatever is accurate. What is the greatest barrier to enlisting male advocates to help you with your career? Is it because they're not available? You're not sure how to find them. It's uncomfortable, getting out of your comfort zone, and maybe that male-female dynamic as well. Is it because you haven't made it a priority? Or did you try it and you know what, just didn't work? And then let's talk about both of these. Oh, wow. 79%. Leave that up there for a second. 79% haven't made it a priority. 63% say it's uncomfortable. 42% not sure how to find them. 13% are not available. Only a few tried it and it just didn't help. So I think we need to really focus on we haven't made it a priority, right? That's pretty easy. We're all here. I think we can, pinky swear that we can make this a priority now. And I think we're going to see the difference. Hey, what do you think about these results?
Yes, I'll chime.
Okay, yeah, jump in, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll chime in if you don't mind. To be honest, I'm not entirely surprised by what the poll results are indicating.
You're not surprised that more.
I'm not surprised that about a third of the group doesn't have a male advocate. I think it doesn't necessarily surprise me. I think there's work to be done on a macro level and just understanding the roles that males can play as allies in a woman's career path and her growth.
Talk about what you've seen in the workplace, the women who have those advocates versus those who don't.
Yeah, I think so. Clearly, if the more you can have advocacy and folks championing on your behalf, the more beneficial it's going to be as you move throughout your career. But just more on a fundamental level, I just want to address, because this might be part of where the disconnect occurs, is kind of the prism or the lens through which you look at advocates, right, or the role of advocate. I think we can broaden the term. Advocates can include folks that are not only who are senior to you, but even folks at your peer level who are willing to champion and advocate on your behalf about your performance, your capabilities. So I think you got to look at advocacy in a broader sense. I think if you look at mentors that you have, not just within the workplace, but even outside of the workplace, and the role that they can play in terms of serving as a sounding board and providing straightforward, honest feedback about the things that you need to work on, or just things that how you manage and operate operate in different environments can be very valuable and can serve in it as a form of advocacy. And then you have sponsors, right? And if those occur, obviously you want them at an executive level, but sponsors who are more directly looking at how they can help you progress in your career. So I think across all those different forms, there's advocacy comes to life, and it's just a matter of looking at it through the right lens to understand, okay, well, I need to have an advocate, and not just in a female form, but also in a male form to help me maximize my opportunities going forward.
Okay, that's really, I appreciate that, Kevin. Thanks for that. Catherine, do you want to jump in? Are you surprised by this information we just learned? And also, don't you feel, I don't want to lead the witness, do you feel like having male advocates, especially in these senior important decision-making roles, is really even a prerequisite to advancement today?
Yeah, I would say yes. I also love what Kevin called out around your peers.
Okay.
Because often what will happen is, if you think about it, if men sometimes get promoted more than women, right? Some of those peers can end up moving in other business or moving higher into a role. And when we do things like talent review in HR, we talk about what you accomplished. So that I talked about being a high performer. The other thing is how you went about getting those things accomplished. And this is where the peers come into play. If you only manage up and you don't nurture, those peer relationships, when you're in a room and people start talking about what you do and how you go about doing it, that's when some development things start to come to play. So I think it's really important to think about that. The other piece that stood out is the time. Making the time for it. And sometimes we as women, we're so concentrated on, being the best and doing the best. We don't think about, okay, I'm doing this work, but I also need to make sure I make time for networking and having right now you can have virtual coffees, which is people say yes to that. They will say yes to that. So I think two things: making sure you think about, who are those potential sponsors, but forget about the people that you're working, with as peers, because later on, or even, with projects, if you're difficult to work with, you're not collaborative, you're not responsive, things like that to them, sometimes those things can come to haunt you later.
Okay, great. I love that, Catherine. Thank you. And I want to get Gay to weigh in real quick. Were you surprised by any of those results, Gay?
No, not really, but I want to echo something that Kevin said, and that is that, I think sometimes you limit yourself to who are your male advocates. And while it's very important to have them inside the organization or the company that you're currently working with, the outsiders can be very important too. And I look back on my career, and many years ago, I was on the Salvation Army board, and there was a man there that I always sat by when we had our board meetings, and he gave me advice. And he was older than me, but he would just say things that were pearls of wisdom. And one of the things he said one time was, Gay, if you don't have about half the people at any given time aren't mad at you, you ain't doing business. And I laughed when he said that, but he would give me little pearls of wisdom, and was one of these people that I could always kind of turn to for advice. And but he was not in my workplace. He was someone I would encounter at these board meetings. So think about the males that are around you. It can be even a family member. It could be, someone you serve on a board with, someone that you are involved with at a church event or whatever. And sometimes those people can be very, very powerful in your life as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Gay. Great points, all three of you. And now I really want to hear from everybody who's participating. So what we're going to do is we're real quick, just for 10 minutes, we're going to divide everybody into a breakout group. So you're going to be in the breakout group. You're going to talk about this one question. You don't need to memorize it. It's already on the screen. What's your experience establishing key relationships with male influencers? What's your experience been like? When did it work? When didn't it? We have some facilitators. Lisa's going to put you in a breakout group for 10 minutes. But first, I have a weird request. When you get in your breakout group, I want to invite you to tell everyone, what are you wearing on your feet? What is your Zoom foot attire. It's not a Manolo for me. So go ahead and kick it off that way. We'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Lisa, let's go ahead and get everybody in their group and get this conversation. We had a great breakout group, and I'd love to hear from all the facilitators. My group, the #1 shoe of choice, you saw mine, but pretty much everybody else was barefoot. I love it. Janine, tell us about you and what you experienced in your breakout session and who won for the best foot apparel.
Well, hi, thank you so much. I'm Janine Watanabe. I'm the Director of Network Operations for Cox Communications. In our breakout room, we too were similarly not wearing a lot of footwear. We had a combination of socks and barefoot. Regardless of the temperature throughout the country, everybody was just pretty comfortable. So, and in talking in our breakout session, several of us hadn't necessarily been intentional about walking into somebody's office and asking them to be a sponsor, but had built relationships over time where it had kind of more organically grown into that.
Right.
And as we talked about the way to do that, we talked about the pie model a little bit, performance, image, and exposure, and just, the performance was just kind of the barrier to entry, right? To get you in the door. You had to be a good performer to get there, but also your image and your ability to have exposure, which ties in really nicely to sponsors, is another great opportunity to kind of build on what we're talking about here today.
I love it. Thanks so much, Janine, for sharing that. Michelle Glover, I know that you were a facilitator as well, and Michelle's a fantastic coach and has been on this program a number of times and written for Pink as well. What were some of the aha moments for you all?
Yeah, and so a lot of what Janine said about things happening organically and focus on building the relationship. So that was some of the comments. A lot of the women on the call are in male-dominated industries, and they said, it was all about focusing on the relationships. Sometimes as women, we assume, I think one person had shared, having some with childcare and some of the things that having 3 kids, and we assume that the men also aren't having issues with childcare and working remotely and having the kids, and we just make all of these assumptions that really could be conversation starters as we work to build those relationships. There's commonalities that we don't always address because we make assumptions unnecessarily. So really being open to the dialogue, open to the relationship first. And as Janine said, before going in and asking for, sponsorship. And another thing I just want to highlight, we talked about performance. And one thing that men can do, because reality is the Fortune 500 companies, only 37 of them are won by women, right? 3 of them by women of color and 0 Black or Latina women. I think now we make it 1 with Roz, with Walgreens. But the point is they're in the rooms that we're not in. So we want to have our performance, but we also need men to advocate for us in the rooms about our performance. And sometimes as women, we're not as open with sharing the great works that we've done because we want to be humble. But this is a time to let your performance shine and be vocal about it, not to the point of arrogant or obnoxious, but share what you're doing so then people know. So when they're in the rooms, they can advocate for you correctly.
Oh my gosh, Michelle is like a fire hose. You said some specific things. 2 things that I really love is 1, the emphasis on getting to know, the men around you who are peers and who are higher up in the organization you want advocacy from, get to know them as people. And number 2, you talked a little bit about, having the nerve to really do it. And that came up in our group, our breakout group, which is, I'm too timid. We say that a lot. So just stepping up and doing it. Annette Tarabasso, I'd love to go to you and hear what your highlights were in your group.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, I'd like to report on our feet attire. So
Please.
It seems like sneakers are actually sneakers and slippers combined, but sneakers and slippers and some barefoot. However, my favorite was a blanket with a foot pouch. So that was actually my favorite. So in our group, similar to some things mentioned by Michelle, is try to do this organically. But one thing that I thought was interesting is, our group, I think there were some people that did respond that they haven't made this a priority. And I think it also depended on whether their environments that they worked in were more female dominated or oriented or male dominated or oriented. And if you're in a female working environment, like maybe in a certain segment of a business, you may have to more actively, find a male advocate, or maybe there's other just males around you that you're working in, so it's a little bit more comfortable. So that was one. Also, that the relationship can and probably most likely evolve, which speaks to a little bit of starting out organically. I think the session was. This session in particular with Zoominar was good because it is causing people to think about this a little bit more, like maybe I do need an advocate. And then I think when you're looking at an advocate, someone had mentioned, leverage your strengths that you personally have to secure an advocate, but also look at some of your limitations. And I love the example about sports, like maybe you aren't as knowledgeable about sports or interested, but use that to your advantage and start asking some questions because people do want to help. And then one of the things I shared is, an advocate to me, there's sponsors, there's mentors, but an advocate to me is someone who publicly recommends or supports you publicly in a meeting with others to get you promoted, to get you that raise, to get you that advancement. And from my experience at Deloitte and working with others is we were always told someone needs to be in that room to be your advocate to get you to your next step. And what does that really mean? They need to pound the table for Cynthia, pound the table. And, and if they're breaking the table for Cynthia, and wow, you really have an advocate. So I think to think in mind that it's someone who will publicly recommend and support.
Oh my gosh, another fire hose. Thank you, Annette. That was amazing. Kevin, how do we get our advocates to pound the table for us? What do we do? What's the magic potion? What do we say? How do we make that happen?
No, it's a great question. It's something that came up a little bit in our breakout as well. I think performance is a must, right? I think as long as you're performing with excellence, it gives you a chance not just to advocate for yourself, but it gives your potential advocates the tools to champion on your behalf, right? Whether they be male or female. So I think you got to check that box in terms of making sure your performance is allowing you to separate from your peers and gives you that platform to warrant the opportunities that you think should be coming your way.
Great. Okay, so you got the performance and you're amazing at what you do. And now you want Kevin to go in there and pound the table like Annette said. What do I say? Give us the secret potion. How can we enlist that support? Give us some verbiage. What do we do? Get to know the men around us, and then what? How do you ask for that support?
Yeah, I think I'd offer up a couple of suggestions. One, I think the importance of, as much as performance is a must-have, you can't underestimate the importance of soft skills, and it's the ability to build relationships and build rapport, find commonalities that allow you to, foster alliances that go beyond just, all right, well, their growth index versus previous year, right? They want to be able to, you want someone who's going to be able to want to advocate and champion for you because they like you personally as much as they want to see you succeed professionally. I think that always is a great combination. I think beyond that, we've talked also about the direct approach, right? Sometimes you just have to plainly lay out what you're looking for. And so that may, and for some folks, it may require you to get comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, because it's not always natural to go and ask for someone or ask for someone to advocate on your behalf or do something to benefit you. But I think those are going to be, you have to get comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations. And then finally, I add that it's a two-way street, right? It can't just be all about you, right? I mean, if you're providing some benefit in terms of, adding value to the company and giving that advocate a chance to look good because you're looking so good, you want to make it so that there's some sort of benefit or reciprocity or reward on both sides.
I love that. And in fact, Gay, you had a lot to say about that reciprocity. You want to speak to that for a moment? And you're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, it's always a two-way street. And one thing I learned a long time ago is that for most males, it's a natural to say, okay, I'm going to do this for you. You're going to do that for me. And there's an expectation of that exchange. For women, it's not so much that way, I've found through the years. Um, they don't necessarily think, well, if I do that, you're going to do something back. So you have to kind of set that expectation and just say, yeah, what can I do for you? And I'm going to give you an interesting example. One time I helped a young man with an entry into an MBA program. And I've helped a lot of women do things. And through the years, I tried to make connections for them. Immediately, he wrote back after he got accepted. And he thanked me profusely. But he also, and here's this young guy, he wasn't even my peer. At the end of his email, he said, and Gay, let me know if there's anything I can ever do for you. And that really stood out to me because now he built a relationship with me. And he said, and so then I have an expectation. What could he do for me? I've never had a woman do that. I've never, they would never end that email of thanking me by saying, and Gay, what could I do for you sometime? Let me know. And so I found it's really an interesting dynamic. So women need to be thinking that way, that you help me, I'll help you. And we go back and forth and it builds that relationship. One thing I want to bring forward though, from our breakout room was something that Shelley Lightfoot really teed up. And that is that if we want candid relationships, it's getting more and more difficult. And sometimes, men especially will be walking on eggshells and it's hard to give you an honest critique. It's hard to tell it like it is sometimes because of fear of, well, that's a woman, I can't offend her. I have to be very careful with HR, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So what Shelley started talking about and what we all concluded is that as women, if we want a male advocate or we want an honest critique, we need to give that person permission, I think. And you really, when you're in your conversations with them, you would say, I really want the honest truth here. I want you to help me. I want you to tell me if I can improve on something or if I can do something better or if you have some advice for me. Please tell me. I accept that. I want that. And that gives that person permission to talk to you in a way that really can be more honest and realistic. So that's a very valuable, I think, exchange that we all need to have with any boss we have, but certainly with a male counterpart or male advocate.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Shelley Lightfoot because I was just going to go to Shelley. Shelley, that's a super great point. Do you have anything else to add around that? Because I do want to begin to have a conversation around why this is so difficult and how do we overcome some of those obstacles. It is uncomfortable. As Kevin said, you got to get out of your comfort zone and ask. The male-female dynamic, that's uncomfortable. And also the fact that, look, I don't see any, I mean, maybe my dog, but I don't see anybody around here who's going to advocate for me in the workplace because I can't even go to the workplace. You're not even going to bump into a leader at the water fountain because you're not there. So those are some things we need to talk about. Shelley, you want to jump in on that?
Hi, Cynthia. Thank you very much for the opportunity. As Gay mentioned, that was the highlight of our breakout session. Just being able to accept that constructive criticism, making yourself, as we talked about earlier, available, not saying no, saying yes to some of those opportunities. In our breakout session, we did find that all of our members are, they did have male advocates. We had one person who has worked primarily with males and has found that her whole career that she has been advocated for by men. And then we have had and there was another lady, she, was able to obtain, I think it was a bonus of some structure, I can't remember, but just because a male told her to ask for it. So I think all of the ladies in our group, they have positioned themselves to be, in the presence of men who do advocate for them. And so that was a good takeaway. And we all had some cute little slippers.
Show us yours. Come on, Shelley. Show us what you got. You weren't the one with
oh my gosh.
Whoever had a blanket with a foot pouch, like we need to send you a trophy. What have you got? Show us, Shelley.
These are my bionics. They give me the arch support that I need to walk around the house all day.
And they're pretty good looking too. All right, let's talk a little bit about, how do we, and Catherine, you had some great suggestions when we spoke offline. How do we deal with the fact that we're not going to bump into any of these guys at the office? What do you do about that? Catherine Jefferson.
I just unmuted. Thank you. So, you know, I would say the wonderful thing, and I see lots of companies represented. I have become a huge fan of Teams. I don't know what platform you all use, but the cool thing is you can still schedule conversations with people, and and still cultivate relationships. So I would say don't make that excuse or a barrier that because we're remote, we can't connect, because we can. We're doing it now. And so I would just say, you know, when you want to connect, if it's someone you're starting to cultivate a relationship with, you want to make sure you're direct. Hey, I want to spend some time. Can I find some time on your calendar for us to connect and get to know each other better? If it's someone that you already have a relationship with, really focus. Like what might you want some feedback about? So it's not just so general. And of course, the higher up you go, when you're engaging with that individual, you want to make sure you have a purpose behind it, and it's not just you have that great opportunity to be around that person and connect. Be intentional about what you want to talk about or what you want to explore. So those would be some things, but don't let COVID be the reason why you're not connecting. You can still connect, and just to share with you guys, I joined Cox Media Group November 30th last year. Many, I would say 99, including some of my team members here, I have never met in person. Never met them in person. And we've been through a lot of things together, and I've built some pretty strong relationships in less than a year, all virtually.
Wow.
So
Okay, so it's possible.
Yeah, it's possible. Don't let you know, the virtual environment hinder you.
All right. It's time now to raise any questions. If anyone who's joining us has a question, if you'd like to unmute yourself and just sort of jump in there. So many great things have already been shared today. We put some fantastic resources up on the screen for you. I know we put together before the conversation some takeaways, a few tips, but I think that we've even gotten better tips during the conversation. So please jump in if you do have a question. Carmen, are you there? I think Carmen McLeod is joining us, maybe to give us some input from your group and see if you have any questions or comments for our speakers. I know Carmen initially didn't have a computer, so she was in on somebody else's computer. But anyway, if you can join us, great. We'd love to hear from you. Let's go ahead and pop up some of those solutions on the screen, Lisa, so everybody can see some of the things we talked about prior to this larger conversation. I think we've gotten more suggestions now. First of all, identify men who are moving up in your organization. And I love the addition to that, which is identify men who are peers that can be advocates. And again, I have to mention Annette's definition of an advocate, someone who can publicly recommend and or support you to advance in the organization, someone who will go on and pound the table. Identify a few of those individuals. We did have some suggestions about role playing, conversations you can ask. Maybe we can get Catherine to jump in on that and give us some verbiage. What do you say to somebody, Catherine, when you know that they're a great advocate for you, you've identified them as an individual, you've got them on the conversation, you're doing a Zoom or a Teams meeting with them? Give us some wording to use.
Well, I think, was it Gay that first of all say thank you and show appreciation? Then again, I would also say be really specific. Because if you're on, you know, if you're meeting for 30 minutes, you want to respect their time. So I literally would say, thank you, I respect your time. I know, so I'm going to be really focused. And so you may start with a little bit of just general conversation about family or whatever, you know, that you have in common or things you've explored before. And then you want to get into whatever it is that directness about what you're wanting to explore, what you want to get feedback on, because time is our biggest currency. And it's nothing more insulting than someone take the time and you're not prepared. So just make sure that, you know, whether you're role playing or whatever, just be sure you're prepared, you know what you want to talk about. and really respect that that time is precious.
All right. Anything quick to add, super quick, Kevin, to that? And then Gail, I'll go to you.
Yeah, just in terms of, the virtual working environment and the challenges that presents, you don't have those water cooler moments. You don't have the hallway and elevator encounters. You're not gonna pass by folks in the cafeteria and get that exposure that you normally might get in the old world. So I think you just have to be much more purposeful with your actions. You know, seek to find out folks that to locate and identify folks that can aid you along your path. Folks like to be celebrated. So if there's a big win on the business, and you want to use that as an opportunity to reach out and establish a relationship, or to build a better rapport. If there's an area of interest or passion, maybe you look out, maybe you send a message saying, hey, can I find out more about this area, just to start to build that dialogue and express kind of where you have your passion points. So I think there's a number of ways to do it, but you have to be purposeful about it.
Okay, I love it. And Gay?
Here's a different thought. One of the things that I think we can all do is, when you are with your male counterparts or a male leader, if you would advocate for other women. I think that's an interesting role for you to play, because it takes the spotlight off yourself, and it's not just about you and advancing your career and what you want to do. But when you put the spotlight on other women that should be promoted or should be recognized, I think it says a lot about you. So it's an interesting way to look at it, and it helps all women, and the boats rise that way.
Okay. Thanks so much, Gay. And I want to just recap super quick. We found that 79% of those participating on this call haven't made it a priority having male advocates. So I would like to challenge each and every one on this program to identify 3 men who could be a male advocate for you and reach out to them, find common ground, establish that relationship, be purposeful, and ask for what you want. Make it a priority. We know it's uncomfortable. It's okay to get out of your comfort zone. We're going to go ahead and put together all of these takeaways and send it back to you as a recap, because it's a lot to digest. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. Want to thank our experts. You have been amazing. Yay. Applause for our experts. Want to make real quick a mention of what's coming up next. We're doing these Pink Power Alliance Zoominars on the last Thursday of every month. Here's what's coming up next. Find your male advocate. Obviously, that's today. How to excel amidst entrenched bias. This is huge. This is going to be another really heavy, important conversation. In March, we've been asked again to deal with well-being, since this continues to be an issue. In April, we're going to talk about how to be an advocate for yourself, because let's face it, that's where it all starts. And there's more to come after that. Also want to mention upcoming, the next big thing at Pink is we've got this big event coming up on March 9th. This is free to all of our sponsor companies, so make sure your organization is participating. If not, there are discounts for those of you who are Pink Power Alliance members. We hope to see you there. We'll have the CEO of UPS, Carol Tomei, in addition to some other super spectacular speakers. And, I do want to acknowledge the importance of being good to yourself. This is a difficult time for all of us. We sit on these calls, and I want to invite you not just to stretch yourself, but to stretch. So let's take a moment to just reach up. Don't make me be the only one doing this. Reach up and stretch. Drop your head back. Drop your arms to the left and the right. I hear the cracking. Okay, that feels really good. We're gonna wrap this up now. I do want to invite you all to stay tuned to chat informally if you would like. I know a lot of you do have to go. Your time's valuable, so I want to leave you with this. Here are just a few words of wisdom from a very wise person. You had a chance, I think, to meet Amanda Gorman last week at the presidential inauguration, 22-year-old poet laureate. And she says this, and this applies to everything we talked about today. There is always light if we are brave enough to see it and brave enough to be it. So with that, wishing that all of you have the courage to shine the light on yourselves and ask for what you want and to be kind to each other. And we will see you soon. Thanks again for being part of this. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia.
And we're just going to open it up to conversation and informal networking after this.